Hi guys, Debbie Dubois here. Welcome back to my channel, True Sacred Union. This is my Twin Flame series, and if you haven't seen the first video, it's really the only one that I feel is extremely helpful to kind of set the stage for these videos, but they're very much a mix and match set of videos that I am going to continue to churn out as I am inspired. I just did do a video on rejection and abandonment, and if you haven't seen that one, I'm not sure which way I point. I think it's this way. You might, because there's the scrolly thing that goes across the top that I think I need to start using with this particular series. We're going to go into rejection and abandonment a little bit further. We're going to talk about the stories that we tell ourselves, because the stories that we tell ourselves is extremely indicative of how we feel about things. So let's talk a little bit about the stories that we tell ourselves. In the Catalytic Heart Awakening connection, most of the time that we are experiencing the fear and rejection and all of those things, a lot of that stems from our perceived or the perception that we have that someone is leaving us or withdrawing from us, or even running in the other direction from us. And we tell ourselves a story that it has to do with us, that it actually has to do with something we said, something we did, some kind of thing inside of us that is broken. And again, those are just stories that we tell ourselves. And we get really specific about the stories we tell ourselves, because the stories we tell ourselves are so tied into our conscious recollection of decisions that we made a long, long time ago. They say that we make the decisions consciously in this lifetime of how we view the world in the first 7 years. So we experience something and we replay it again and again and again until it becomes a belief. And this is sort of the explanation of why siblings can turn out so completely different, is that I do believe there might be a seed of maybe even past life experience that comes in with you. So when you experience something, you're like, that's what this means. And you cement that in your mind. But we're pretty malleable as we're coming in terms of like how we form our perspectives or our perceptions of what's happening in a situation. So we get pretty detailed in our stories. We will tell ourselves all kinds of things. The person must not be texting me back because they didn't like the way I said things, or maybe they think I'm being clingy, or maybe, we will go on and on and on. And then we'll start painting pictures. Well, they're doing this right now, or maybe they're doing that right now. We have these full-blown conversations with ourselves, trying to figure it all out. And I think that that's probably the reason why we tell ourselves stories. We tell ourselves stories because we somehow feel we have to have an explanation for everything that happens. It's not enough to just say, I have no idea what this means. And I remember a long time ago, Tara Singh, I just barely brushed on some teachings from Tara Singh, but it was also A Course in Miracles, and it was, I have no idea what any of this means. I don't know what this means. That's just not something that our ego mind will even entertain. We got to know what everything means. I know what they're saying. I know what this means. Of course, there are personality styles that actually do that more than others. High dominant directive personality styles like myself. I tend to think, I know what that means. And I know, so have I told myself some doozy stories during my connection and through my own path. So, I'm sure that, we all have ways of telling ourselves stories. But what we have to understand is that I think the first step and the first stage of moving beyond this is, the first step is to start looking at the stories that you're telling yourself and find out how helpful are those stories. If you're telling yourself a story that is, well, he didn't text me back because I've texted him so many times and he's tired of hearing from me and blah, blah, blah. That's really not a helpful story for you because that puts you in the position of being unliked, unwanted, I guess I can't even think of any more words to describe it. I mean, I think that does it. The stories we tell ourselves, if we stop and look at the story that we're telling ourselves in any particular moment, we can kind of judge, is this helpful for me or is this not helpful for me? If you're going to tell stories, why not tell yourself a really, really good story? Like, oh, he didn't text me back because his house is burning down and that's really high priority. So it's really nothing I've done or said. And I'm sure that when the flames are out and the fire department has left, he'll text me back. In other words, we tend to tell stories that are not advantageous to ourselves. We put the other person on the pedestal and we think that, oh, it's just something I've done is something. How about recrafting your stories? I have found this extremely helpful throughout the transition from going from telling myself stories to absolutely dropping stories, because the objective in all of this is to drop the story. My first words of advice would be, if you can identify the story that you're telling yourself, oh, I think he's not texting me back because ... If you can catch yourself when you're telling yourself a story and then say, I'm telling myself a story that I really don't know the truth about. I'm just painting this picture in my mind. I'm crafting this story that is true for me. And so I'm crafting a story that is true in my reality. Therefore, I'm creating my reality based upon the story I'm telling myself. You can stop yourself in all kinds of circumstances and become conscious of doing this. The first thing you're going to want to do is say, can I just admit that I might have no effing clue what the situation really is? I am making this up as I go along, and that can be very powerful and not necessarily in my best interest to do that, because I'm telling myself all kinds of stories that are creating my reality. Okay, the first step is that. Catch yourself when you're telling yourself a story. Now, when you're telling yourself a story and you can see the story, then you start asking yourself, is this a helpful story? Am I telling myself something that is creating a reality that I prefer? Or is it creating a reality that I really don't prefer? That's the next step. So if you can kind of say, this is a story that makes me feel better, increases my energy, it doesn't really hurt anything in my world, you're on the right track, okay? But if you're telling yourself stories that are putting yourself down and minimizing your specialness as a human, then you might want to take a look at that. Sometimes it's not really easy to drop stories that are deeply ingrained in us. It's probably one of the hardest things that we can do, especially if we're programmed from a young age to think a particular way. So my recommendation is if you can't drop the story, see if you can't recraft it in a better light for you. Optimally you drop the story and realize, I don't really know what any of this means. I don't know what he's doing. We can think we do because we know we're intuitive and we can tune in, and sometimes we kid ourselves into thinking we know. But the truth is, we don't really know for sure unless we get some corroboration. But why create a story that we don't have any corroboration from the beginning? And remember, you will get outside confirmation that your stories are true when you really believe something. So it's just so much more helpful to not have a story at all. But if you have to have a story, the story really needs to be something that is to your benefit. In other words, craft a story that raises your vibration. I guess that's the bottom line. Think about, what story can I create in this moment of now, if I'm not able to drop it, that actually is better for me, raising my own vibration. And I guess I'll leave it right there. I'm so excited to be doing these videos. It feels so great to be able to share some of this information with you. And until next time, namaste.